Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's edition of Anchor Watch. I am Bobby Jones with the executive producer extraordinaire, Sam Osterhout. I, it's been a heck of a week. Well, it's been a heck of a weekend. Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I have so many questions for you, Bobby.
Well, let's get right to it because this has been, whew, man. I just keep shaking my head every day. I wake up and there's new headlines to this stuff. What you got?
First, thank you for your voice because there's so much going back and forth, and it feels like a misinformation campaign from our own government. And I can understand that if you're at war with someone, you want to keep the enemy, guessing about what's going to happen. But this doesn't feel like that. This feels like they don't know what they're doing. And so I just want to let's set the table. What actually is happening in Iran right now?
Long story short, you have an administration that started a war that has no idea how to end it. So what they're going to do, because they have burned pretty much all their diplomatic options at this point, is they're going to ratchet up the pressure, not just against Iran and their allies, but they're going to ratchet up the pressure again with America's historic allies. And I use that term very deliberately because our historic allies are looking at us like, what the hell are y'all doing? And why do you think we need to get involved? Okay. Right. I saw Starmer, the UK prime minister, have to go to the House of Commons. Prime minister's questions is the greatest thing in politics, to watch him have to stand up every week and defend what's going on. Right. He basically had to declare there will be no Brits doing this. Basically, we'll provide this, that, and other, but we will not go in with the United States. So historically speaking, that is a bold claim. That is a bold statement. It's a bold posturing, right? And that's just following really the lead of their Canadian cousins who were like, oh, no, we're not doing this. We're in a state where we started a war, did not understand what we were starting, completely underestimated the resiliency of the enemy, offended them militarily and politically by decapitating the original regime. They were prepared for it, rolled in a more extreme regime in their place, only now they're hardened because martyrdom is a huge deal in that culture. And the words, I'm sorry, or we messed up, or we were in error, whatever you want to put, against civilian targets to include 165 girls at a school has hardened their resolve. So, as they have said, and this is what's killing me, it's Iran is outmaneuvering the United States on so many levels right now. Public relations. They said, hey, the strait is not closed. There were a couple of tankers that went through just the other day that are going through. It's just yours ain't going through. Okay? Let's be clear. The propaganda thing. Man, there are videos and memes. This Lego video that Iran did that it went like millions and millions and millions of views. Getting our ass handed to us in that sphere. And at the end of the day, you cannot tell the American public, you refuse to tell the American public, you refuse to sit your flabby butt down in the Oval Office at the Resolute desk and tell us what the hell we're doing. So it has a weekend at Bernie's feel with real world ramifications. You now have hundreds, let me be very clear, hundreds of wounded American service members who can't even go on their bases. They're abandoned because it's not safe for them to go. And you have dead Americans.
So let's talk about that just for a second, because there was reporting last week that 13 bases, something like that, a dozen bases across the Gulf, had been essentially abandoned. So the United States can no longer inhabit its own military bases. We have troops living out of hotels across the region. What does that do for troop morale? Like, put yourself in that situation, Bobby.
It's very easy for me to put myself in that situation. When we struck and killed Soleimani, I was on deployment in UAE dealing with the ramifications of that and the strikes that happened at Erbil Air Force Base in Iraq. That's where they chose to strike back. Now, we didn't know where they were going to strike, so we had to deal with the contingency of, okay, they could bomb us. They didn't. But where they bombed, when this thing started off this time, amongst the first places bombed was where we were and where we are, right? And so they're not working from their base because it's been obliterated, right? I can tell you morale, of course, is going to be off. If not low, it's going to be completely off because your patterns of life, everything that is required for you to do an already hard job has been disrupted. But most importantly, the air of invincibility that you may have thought you had, that the American public believes, and most importantly, what your American leadership tells you has been shattered. Dude, you can't go to work. You can't even go out in public to go eat and this, that, and the other because you're going to be targeted because terrorist cells have been activated. Everybody in the Fifth Fleet or CENTCOM AOR, Area of Responsibility, they're on high alert as American service members. They're trying to blend in. You got force protection methods here in the United States where you're here and people are telling you to change at work into uniform. Don't ride to work in uniform. All of this is happening on United States soil because these people who are in the White House, or more important, let me be very clear, at Mar-a-Lago, did not think through any of this. Why? Because you keep firing people who had the expertise, who've been there and done that. You stop the promotions of people because of their skin color or their gender. We're going to get into that later, okay? You've done everything to neuter the expertise and, most importantly, the experience of 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan because you have some psychopaths in the inner circle. That's what's happening. If you think Admiral Halsey resigning from Southcom commander was just some random thing, you're wrong. He saw this. Okay? He saw this. You think it's a coincidence that Trump had to go pull someone out of retirement who said, I'll do whatever you want to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Now, in his defense, he's trying to be professional, but he's been put in a rock and a hard place. But anybody who was up for that job, no one wants to work with Trump or Hegseth. No one. This is a crisis of leadership. Everything else off of that, the branches off of that, is what's happening. But the crisis is of leadership. You have a man who is reportedly bored with the war that he started. You have a sycophant in the Secretary of Defense who, again, was a crap officer. I cannot hammer this enough, was a terrible officer in the National Guard, and multiple people who serve with them have said this. And now you've given him the keys to the entire Department of Defense to the point where you can't do basic math. This guy said, what's going to happen is this war continues to go on. We're going to run out of interceptors. We're going to have to ration what we defend. And then Iran's going to bring out the Gucci stuff. And a report came out here in the last 24 hours that United States intelligence says Iran's only used 33% of their inventory. It's almost like someone knew that. And now Israel is getting swacked every night. Palm Sunday canceled. I mean, I could go all day on this because you have people who are not serious about the profession of war and the strategic value and sacrifice that it brings. They thought it was a 1980s movie. They got high on their own supply because they caught Venezuela sleeping, but Iran is not Venezuela. Never has been, never will be. Iran is the last nation to actually attack successfully and damn near sink a U.S. warship underway. And that was the start, and that was back in the 80s in the tanker wars. But it was Iran, not China, not Russia. It was Iran. And people seem to forget that. And all they've had is time to prepare for this scenario since the 80s. And that's why we're struggling.
And not only that, since the 80s, we've been telling them, we're coming to get you, Iran. We're coming to get you. We don't like you. We're coming to get you. And so, of course, they're like, well, shit, I guess we'll do this. And to another point, they are the innovators of the self-detonated, suicide bomber.
Yes. And one more point on that, too. Make no mistake, the one window where they trusted us, they got a deal done with Barack Obama. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. Not a coincidence that the first black president was the guy that actually brokered that deal. Okay? Every damn last one of us would love to be in that situation when we had that deal right now. Right now, despite the rhetoric. Okay? To include the rest of the world.
Including Trump. Trump's trying to get back to that deal.
Exactly.
That's the deal that he wants.
Can't do it. He can't do it because he John Wooden, the coach of UCLA, the dynasty that established UCLA basketball, had a saying: "Be quick, but don't hurry." Donald Trump never heard of that. He never heard of that. He has the patience of a gnat on speed. And the problem with that is, in diplomatic relations, you have to have patience and take in all information. He knew that the information that he got, again, Tulsi Gabbard, she's dealing with domestic election issues, right? Okay. She's not even in the room for the decision making. And Hegseth, Rubio, Vance, that's the three. And this is on them because they're the handlers at this point.
Witkoff, Kushner.
Well, so Witkoff and Kushner, to me, are happy pawns because they're like, hey, look, we're going to ruin your reputation internationally for the rest of your life, but you're going to be filthy rich. Kushner's like, okay. Witkoff's like, okay. Great. They know they won't be able to do business outside of the tight, demented neocon circle that they're going to be part of. But here's the deal. They have no experience in the jobs that they have. And none of them would hire, say, me or you to be a real estate mogul across the sea. They wouldn't. But that's what we've effectively done. We've taken novices and made them the lead diplomats in an active hot-ass war.
Oh, my God.
I don't know where to go with this. I mean, this is where we're at.
Look, I think, look, I was talking about this with Susan Demas earlier today. They can ban abortion. It actually doesn't affect Trump or any of them, right?
Right.
They can ban mail-in voting. Trump still is going to mail his ballot, right?
Because he's the president of the United States. That was the excuse.
Right. None of these, none of their regulations, laws, policies, anything actually affect them for the negative. And I feel like that this is extending to this particular war. It's a war. Right. The only thing and you notice the only thing Trump cares about is people's public opinion of it. He was apparently surprised that he didn't get the George W. Bush, bump that he got back in 3, right. Or right. At the beginning of the Afghan war. Like, that was a surprise to him. And you're like, oh, well, this is why you're doing this war. That's it, because you had bad polling and you're a child molester.
Yeah, I mean. He thought it would be a sufficient distraction without recognizing what the environment of 03 was like. And here's the other piece too. 03, Afghanistan and Iraq was before the rise of social media. Why do I say this? Social media has begat independent journalism. We're seeing pictures, we're getting stories, firsthand accounts that we would have never gotten in 2003. Never. Totally. Wouldn't have made it through the network censors. And so when you can get a clip of the Tomahawk that was launched, that's basically the one that killed those 165 girls, or I think that was the second Tomahawk because it was a dual strike.
Right.
What's amazing is in 2003, we would have never saw it. They would have denied it and said it just happened, would have blamed Iran and this and other. But no, sir, we have the video.
Yeah.
We have the videos of hotels getting lit up like Christmas trees. We have the pictures of the AWACS planes, the Air Force planes that got bombed and hit in Iraq. Your deniability means nothing now because you can't control the narrative. You've tried to kick out the Pentagon's press corps. Doesn't matter. People are still leaking. You've tried to control the information flow. Doesn't matter. You're getting your ass handed to you in information warfare on a war that you chose to start. That is the definition of incompetence.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, look, I think we could talk about the incompetence all day, but let's talk about options because as you said, Iran is saying, oh, the strait's not closed. It's just closed for you. And what they're really saying is we own it. It belongs to us. Now they have control of the strait. That's a thing they didn't have before the war. They have gotten a break on their oil embargoes, sanctions. They didn't have that before the war.
Nope.
They have Israel on its heels. That wasn't a feature. So Trump's options are limited. He has threatened a couple of things. And let me roll this clip here because it goes to one of the options and also the expertise that you were talking about. Let's roll this and then we'll talk.
The president posted this morning about, his threat that on leaving Iran, he said we might blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, Harg Island, and possibly all desalinization plants. Under international law, striking civilian infrastructure like that is generally prohibited. Why is the president threatening what would amount to potentially a war crime with the U.S. military? And how do you square that with the administration repeatedly saying that the U.S. does not target civilians?
Look, the president has made it quite clear to the Iranian regime at this moment in time, as evidenced by the statement that you just read, that their best move is to make a deal, or else the United States Armed Forces has capabilities beyond their wildest imagination, and the president is not afraid to use them. That's not what I said, Garrett. And you're saying the word potential for a reason, because I'm sure some experts are telling you that in your ear to try to ask me that question. Of course, this administration and the United States Armed Forces will always act within the confines of the law. But with respect to achieving the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump is going to move forward unabated, and he expects the Iranian regime to make a deal with the administration.
To that end, which of the
First of all, if just give me a second here, Sam. Body language tells you a lot. Miss Levitt, she teased her hair. She looked up. She had to collect herself because she did not have a good, competent answer for the question. And if you notice, she glanced down twice to try to stay on talking point because they don't have a god dang answer. Here's the truth. Here's the truth, right? Those targets, if we strike them, we have committed war crimes. Period, full stop. Anything that is basically life-sustaining for a civilian population that is purposely attacked deliberately is a war crime. Ask Germany. Ask Japan. Okay? When you do this, and by the way, just to be very clear, these are rules that the United States helped primarily establish. Okay? This is not some Euro hippie bullshit. This is what we as officers, we as a military are trained on. Okay? The fact of the matter is, if they do that, there are two Rubicons that cannot be uncrossed once they're crossed. The attacking of water and desalinization plants and the forced entry into the Strait of Hormuz. Those are the two that cannot be, that once you ring those bells, we're in Vietnam 3.0. 3.0. Afghanistan, Iraq was 2.0. This will be 3.0.
Talk through the implications of both of those Rubicons.
So let's start with the desalinization. Over 70% of the Middle East gets their fresh water supply from desalinization plants. Okay. And there's a ripple effect. Even if you just attack the ones in Iran, you have a ripple effect across the region. And you best believe Iran will retaliate and hit up everybody's across the region. And going back to what I said earlier in these broadcasts, I said it from the first week. They have more missiles than we have interceptors. And now, here in the last 24 hours, the United States intelligence has said we believe that Iran has only used 33%, 1/3 of their inventory. Meanwhile, the United States and their allies are having to ration their interceptors. What does that mean? So in missile defense, again, I worked at the Missile Defense Agency. I went to the Middle East. I was the war games planner. You have to prioritize what places are important, 1 through 4, whatever. And so now those that were 3 and 4 that weren't important or as important will not be defended. Those interceptors are going to be saved for the most important. So you're going to keep hearing civilian areas getting hit, non-military, but yet support structures getting hit by Iran because they're not going to use interceptors to knock them down because they got to keep certain bases up. They got to keep certain government buildings protected, etc. This is where we are, right? And so when I sit there and I say to you, Rubicons that cannot be crossed, if the United States does this and goes after life-supporting infrastructure in Iran, Iran will retaliate swift, hard, and deliberate, and they will not be able to stop them from doing it. I'm not predicting the future. I promise you that's what's going to happen. It's what's going to happen. Because we don't have the math ain't mathing.
So from that, okay, so then talk about
That's the first
Strait of
one.
Hormuz. Talk about
Strait of Hormuz. Again, I want y'all to look at the geography of what we're talking about. He says he wants to get Karg Island, and then there are three other islands that he could possibly do. But Karg Island is the crown jewel. There's a reason the Iranians picked that location to set up that oil hub, because for you to get there, that's a hell of a long way to fight, especially in the maritime domain, to get up there. The amount of shore batteries that you're going to be exposed to from a naval standpoint, and even with air support, you have Marines that are floating, right? Now, here's the other piece of this that I want people to understand. Way back when, so I graduated from not just the Naval Academy, but the Naval War College. Alfred Thayer Mahan, big gunboat diplomacy guy, started that as a think tank, and now it's a university to get your advanced degrees. One of the things he always said: a ship is a fool to fight a fort. He said that 150 years ago, and here we are having a conversation about ships going into the most narrow strait of water on Earth, into the Persian Gulf, and fighting forts, because you got to take out those shore batteries to get there. If you are even able to get your Marines to where you want to land, the topography, the mountainous range there, around there, puts them at a disadvantage. And then if they land on Karg, don't make no mistake, there will be people waiting for them. So you have multiple iterations of where blood can be spilled that's American on the way there to do it. Even if you drop into 82nd, try to go behind enemies, all this kind of stuff, you're fighting a game on someone else's field. They have home field advantage, just like in Vietnam, because in Vietnam it was supposed to work, because we're the technologically superior military. Asymmetric warfare throws all that out the window. And that's the thing. You're talking about two nation states, but asymmetric warfare in the most hostile environment in the world, and it's in Iran's backyard, and they're fighting for survival. How do you like your odds?
Well, also we have a lower tolerance for death and destruction, right? Because
very much so. We've been spoiled.
This is not only were we spoiled, but this is a war of choice.
I agree. But you're hitting on something that Trump's not thinking about. The tolerance of the American public. Why? Because he knows people in America hate him. He knows the poll numbers, but he's been able to get away with it because he's kept Congress and everybody who can check him on lockdown. The reality of the situation is this: if we do this and those coffins start coming back, or heaven help us, you can't even get them back, their burials at sea, where there's nothing for the family to have. Nothing to bury. That's a whole nother psychological disadvantage that you're talking about.
We talk about off ramps a lot, and that you got to look for an off ramp.
No. Well, here's my thing. If we do either the two things I just said, there's no off ramp. You have very, very small possibilities right now of off ramps, but it requires two things: contrition and capitulation. And it's going to have to be a combination of both for both sides. Mm-hmm. If I'm being real, if we're being real, that's what it's going to take. And here's the thing: Iran's only going to take so much of that. Right. Because both times they've tried to negotiate with this administration, they have been bombed in the negotiation, literally. And Trump's personality is not the type where he's going to overtly be contrite about anything. It's going to have to be his handlers. And then they're going to have to basically either lie to him or try to frame it as a magnanimous move on his part. Because if not, it's game over. Yeah. That's why analysts are freaking out. That's why. Do you think it's a coincidence that Bloomberg and all these people are talking about some $200 barrels for oil? Because they're not just factoring in the military situation. They're looking at the lack of diplomatic off-ramps, and they're looking at the personalities of the people leading. Right. Again, you can say everything you want to. Show me the movement. Show me the commitment of forces. This right here is everything you want. And it's not a coincidence. Mark Levin, that crazy psycho, was hyping up a ground invasion today. And Trump retweeted him hyping up a ground invasion. They're trying to desensitize the American public to be prepared for the ground invasion. It's coming.
Bobby.
It's coming. Look, I would love to be wrong about this stuff. And I don't get any personal pleasure off of saying this stuff. But damn it, unfortunately, 26 years in the Navy and the last half decade dealing with that specific problem, actually the last decade of my career. So I know what I've seen. I've been to Al Udeid many times. I've been to Bahrain many times. I've been to freaking UAE all the time. These are the places that are getting hit. These are the obstacles in the path of American forces. You've now eliminated their bases, so they can't even be used as logistical hubs. So now you're talking about at basically what they call afloat sea basing to do that, but you got to get through the strait. You don't have the capability. You decom the minesweepers to get through the strait. That's not even talking about the surface missiles. And then if you get there, the terrain and the problems that the Marine Corps will have trying to get there. And for Lindsey Graham to sit there and say, oh, we did Iwo Jima, bitch, then you sign up.
Yeah, right. Like
Gravity is whooping his ass, and he's
Graham.
over here trying to sit there and volunteer American young people who, by the way, you want to talk about what's going on in the ranks? They are having the discussion, why are we having to do this? I have from very reliable sources that they are pissed off because they feel like Israel dragged them into this.
So, well, and so talk about the troops now at this point. Look, you know, like you say, they're softening the ground for public opinion, for a ground incursion. What's going on in the minds of the men and women who are meant to fight this thing?
You have exercises being canceled. You have leave, you know, when you can go on vacation stuff being denied. You have reservists who are worried about being activated because these are the telltale signs that something major is happening. Now, granted, all of this could change in a moment and everybody can be kumbaya tomorrow. But what you got to understand is for deployments to happen, there are certain mechanisms that have to happen. You have to ramp up this large machinery basically to go and do these missions. The reality of doing it now without your prototypical hubs that you're used to using, Al Udeid Air Base, you ain't using that. Freaking Bahrain, ain't using that. You know, UAE, Kuwait, not using those. Now you have a layer of complexity that, you know, I'm sure Pete Hegseth, the same guy that didn't know what countries were in ASEAN or in the Gulf cooperation countries, that guy had a plan for all that. He didn't. He thought that Iran would turn tail and run. That's what they thought, because the last time they did something like this, they absorbed it. And now you're talking about moving all these people, right? Where, heck, even your airlift capability has been purposely targeted. You think there's a coincidence? They're going after these large Air Force planes. They know exactly what the hell they're doing. And you need to stop underestimating them, because we still are.
Look, I think that there's, you know, I've seen some messaging that like, well, Trump is just, you know, he's saying we're going to do a ground invasion to force concessions from Iran. It's not working. Do you see Iran coming to the table based on any Trump threat? Well, and let me phrase that in a different way. We've talked about the sort of, you know, the cards that Iran is holding. How strong are the cards? How strong is their hand right now?
It's way stronger than it's being portrayed in American media. So, for example, as I'm talking to you, as we're recording this, I'm looking at Al Jazeera right now, and Marco Rubio was on exclusively, and he made these statements saying the Strait of Hormuz will reopen one way or another once our military operation in Iran is over. It's a bold statement, Cotton. It's a bold statement, because here's the deal. How, Sway? How? Is it going to be strictly a military operation? Even if you're able to break through and break it open, how long can you hold it? Right. Now Trump is talking. And the reason I say this is because Trump here over the weekend, the word occupation has entered the chat. And damn it, I'm getting freaking flashbacks of 03, 01, 03, 05, all of this. We've been here. The mission creep has already started. They're trying to desensitize you to it. And for the Secretary of State to go on Al Jazeera, and for those who don't know, that is like the Middle East CNN, and it is not West leaning. Matter of fact, they're pretty straightforward. They just tell you stuff you ain't
great.
gonna hear over here. You know,
it's a
what I'm
great
saying?
outlet. Yeah,
It's a very, if you want to know what the other side is looking like and what the rest of the world's thinking, get on them. They're going out of their way to get him on record saying this.
yeah.
And he voluntarily just did it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So you've now, once again, I keep using the term, painted yourself into a diplomatic corner with a military brush. That's what's happened. That's what's happened. And the effects is it's going to hit more than just the United States, Israel, and Iran. The world is feeling that. We got NPR reporting about what Pope Leo said. Right.
Yeah.
Which, okay, the first American Pope in history, and he's got to deal with this nonsense. Okay. He's got to deal with this nonsense. When you look at the geographical dispersion of the attacks and the major development that we need to talk about, the Houthis entering the chat in this is a significant strategic game. So for those who don't know, the Houthis are basically this group, pretty radical in their ideology, to the point where Saudi Arabia and them have been going at it for years. They are sponsored by Iran, the weapons they use, this, that, and the other. And here in the last 6 years, the United States, particularly the United States Navy, has had skirmishes with them. They have pirates. They've actually used missiles and shot at ships. As a matter of fact, famously, the USS Carney was attacked, and the commanding officer, who I know, great, brilliant commanding officer, they knocked down all of these missiles that were coming at them. But he also talked about the stress that it put on the sailors, this, that, and the other. It was very real, right? They are prepared to shut down the Bab al-Mandeb, or as we call it, the BAM, which is that little narrow exit at the end of the Red Sea, right? Mm-hmm. It is also one of the world's top 5 most strategic straits, because the amount of oil that goes through there, much like the Persian Gulf, 70% of worldwide trade goes through there up into the Suez Canal and kicks you out into the Mediterranean Sea. The Houthis like, we can shut this down too. And if that happens, where they shut down the Strait of Hormuz and the BAM at the same time, the world, not the Middle East, not the United States, not Europe, the world will be crippled. The world will be crippled, and somebody will be forced to act. And that is where we get into the real Wild Wild West territory. This is where the United States may not have allies, but they'll have more sympathetic ears, and the world is going to hold the United States responsible for this. Meanwhile, Iran is going to be like, we tried to negotiate. You attacked us. You killed our children. You've killed our infrastructure. You tried to kill our desalination. You've tried to starve us. Why shouldn't we do this? From their mindset. Because let me ask y'all a question. Here's the way I will look at this. If China came into the freaking Gulf of Mexico and said, we're going to run this, how would the United States deal with that? And then China bombs and destroys the White House, kills the president, whether you like him or not. How would the United States deal with that? Because this is effectively what we've done to Iran. While the United States was negotiating with China on some trade deal, it gets blown, White House gets blown up, and then they want to occupy the Gulf. This is the equivalent to the Iranian. I mean, what am I supposed to say to that?
Look, I think, we talked about this a lot, the objectives, right? The motivation, the prime reason to go to this war, but also if you reshape that a little bit, it's what does winning look like? And winning looks like 2 different things for the United States and for Iran. It's kind of unclear at this moment, and at any moment in the whole duration of the war, what winning actually looks like for the United States, because there's no objective. But what in your mind?
I can tell you what I think politically that they wanted the objectives to be, and now what they have to be. What they wanted the objectives to be was quite frankly a distraction from the Epstein files.
Right.
I think no. And when I say that, Trump has been told before that war will boost poll numbers and kick whatever else is happening domestically to the back. He saw this. This goes back to what you said earlier. That's number 1. Number 2, The objectives now is to try to reestablish status quo. There's no way possible status quo is going to be set because the same people that held status quo for you, you killed.
Yeah, right.
You can't. And even the most moderate Iranian, when it came to the regime, has to look sideways at the United States because they're getting bombed every night. If I live in Tehran, how am I not looking at this situation and saying, is the United States and Israel bombing us making life better for us? This is a fundamental question that's being asked. And here's the thing. You're not going to see that on CNN or even MS Now, and you sure as hell not seeing it on Fox. Al Jazeera is talking to these people. BBC Arabia is talking to these people, and they're saying exactly what I'm telling you. This is the complexity. When Trump failed to help the protesters, when he said we had your back, that was the pivot point. Then this happened, and now they can't find, despite what they're saying, negotiating with the right people. No, you're not. You're trying to manipulate the markets. If that was the case, Iran would recognize it, and we'd be damn near at a ceasefire right now. Meanwhile, you have the 31st MU that have now entered the operational area. You got the 11th MU about to enter the operational area, and the 82nd Airborne still en route. What are we doing? What are we doing? I don't see what he's saying based on the orders that have been issued and based on the lack of information coming from the commander-in-chief.
I just made it down. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, just previewing a little bit. You wake up, Bobby Jones wakes up in the morning, turns on the TV. What are the things that you are looking for? What's the thing you see that's like alarm bells?
Okay, so the first thing is the target list. This thing, the targets that these guys are using are being provided to them by the various intel communities based on real-time intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. What is being attacked? What is being hit? What is being defended? Because right now we're in what we call the economy dealing with centers of gravity. Center of gravity is a major objective in warfare. You do whatever you can to protect yours while attacking the others. Okay. Because of that missile count that I told you about, now this has become a center of gravity war of attrition. How many things can I defend to keep the war going and then attack to take these things out? That's the calculus that we're looking at right now. And so I look at, I'm like, okay, another air base got hit. Okay, but they've already been hit. That's interesting, but not compelling. Is it a new target? If it's a new target, does it produce anything that allows for the war to continue for that side, right? And how long does it take to get that asset back? Those are the three things I'm looking at initially, right? Then after I see that, I try to get, whatever public reporting you can, how many attacks have happened. The time zone difference between the East Coast of the United States and the Middle East is, I want to say 5-6 hours, depending on daylight savings time, if I remember correctly, something to that effect. That's significant because by the time we wake up, nighttime raids have already happened, and a lot of social media has uploaded the videos, and people are spreading it all over the place. By the time Hegseth and General Kane give their briefs when they give them, those have become less frequent as well, too. We have a good idea of the tone of what happened the night before. And then I immediately compare and contrast Hegseth's political speech, because that's what he does.
Right.
General Kane's pretty factual, objective speech. And then what I have seen based on the various reporting that we're getting. There are three things you have to do. I've said this before in the past. History is myth, narrative, truth. Okay? Hegseth is giving you myth because he's lying his ass off half the time. Kane is giving you narrative, meaning in this case, okay, this is happening and we think things are progressing. Not telling us what it's progressing to, by the way, because he has not laid that out, but he's saying how things are progressing. That's the narrative. But then the truth is, we find out a girls' school's been hit. We now have recently found out a freaking sports complex has been
I saw
hit.
That.
Kids playing soccer, dead. Pentagon, no comment. Okay? These are the truths that are being withheld from the American public, right? But again, social media independent journalism. You have a ton of independent journalists in the Middle East right now, risking life and limb to get these stories. So those are the things that I look for. I compare those three things: the myth, the narrative, the truth. I look and see what was targeted, you know what I'm saying, what the target actually provided and how long did it take to recover. And then I'm able to take those two things, smash them together and come up with some sort of narrative on what we are seeing. And 9 times out of 10 is different than what Hexeth is talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's right by accident half the time, or he's telling the truth by accident. So we're going to keep watching this and I feel so grateful to have your voice here. And there's one other thing I want to just play real quick and let's talk for a few minutes, if you don't mind, about this, because I just don't know that it's getting enough play. Let me just roll this clip.
By the way, but pretend I didn't say that, please. Pretend I didn't say that. Please, media, please disregard that statement. Thank you very much. Cuba's next.
So what the hell is happening here? What is going on? And let's take a few minutes to unwind this, and we can go into a little more detail next week if we have to.
Right. Well, let's dig into this a little bit. I'm old enough to remember President Trump upset he did not get the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. We've gone from that to him striking 8 different countries independent of any type of alliance. And now talking about a 9th with Cuba. And at the same time, as you see in this AP headline, let's bring that right back up.
Yep.
Despite threatening Cuba, he's allowing Russia to run the U.S. blockade. Now, for those who don't know what a naval blockade is supposed to do, it is supposed to stop any type of floating vessel of any interest deemed by the United States or anybody doing the blockade to not get passage. Out of all the vessels that could go to Cuba, especially with the history of Russia and Cuba and that island, see the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962.
Oh, is there a history there? I didn't realize.
I'm just throwing it out there. We're now allowing the Russians, who have their oil sanctions lifted, by the way, to help, quote, balance the markets, into Cuba. What manipulation, what spike in the matrix, what glitch am I looking at here? Because this makes zero strategical sense. And now, at the same time you're doing this, you're talking about we're going to go for Cuba next. And I'm not even trying to be facetious when I say this. You in what army? You're literally pulling assets from Indo-Pacific Command, the largest one you have, to go to the smallest one you have in the United States Central Command, geographically speaking. Okay, you're pulling apart weapon systems. You're telling ships that's supposed to be in the South China Sea, hey, get ready to bring your ass over to the Middle East. And you're going to threaten Cuba? Does this man think this is a game of Risk? I can't think of any logical explanation. If I took the most junior officer in the United States military and laid all of the last year out for them and gave them an economy of forces and be like, distribute that so you meet all your missions, they will come at me after about 30 minutes and be like, it's impossible. Like, I know.
Okay, so big picture here then, like take Venezuela, take Cuba, take all of the, there were reports this week that even European, like Germany, France, committed troops to Greenland, specifically in the off chance that they would have to fight Americans. Like they were prepping a war.
They've been running exercises, Sam. They just added more people since this rhetoric started.
So look, we're in, this is a shit show, number one, but number two, like take, don't even go into Cuban strategy or reasoning or anything like that. What does this do for us globally? And also countries who are bad actors, if I was a bad actor and I wanted to do bad acts, I would be like, well, this is here's my chance.
The United States has not been thought this lowly of internationally since before the Spanish-American War at the end of the 19th century. Let me be very clear and let me be very succinct and say that again. Before the Battle of Manila in the Spanish-American War, where Admiral Dewey beat the Spanish Armada, the United States was seen as a backwater country with a lot of natural resources and a lot of contradictory ideas. That's what we were thought of. Since that moment, we became an international player on the stage. World War I allowed us to be an international power on the stage. World War II allowed us to become the international power on the stage. It's been this cliff, this mountain, and now we're coming down fast like it's a cliff. Because up until 18 months ago, we still retained a lot of that prestige that literally took 125 years to gain. In less than a year and a half, we have watched it dwindle, be destroyed, ripped apart, and because of it, in my humble opinion, and you can talk to people like John Meacham, historians that are really good at this, but I love history, so I study it relentlessly. We are making the same mistakes we made prior to the First Great War, where alliances have been broken apart, reconstituted, and an arms race has begun. If you look at every last one of our NATO allies, they have increased defense spending really epically because they no longer can rely on the United States as a grantor of security. Facts. This is before Trump said give more money to NATO. They're doing individual contracts. Japan, who has a pacifist constitution, is now looking for every way around it, and they have started to rearm themselves. All of these things are the butterfly effect of Donald Trump being in office a second time. And it's going to be something that historians are going to pinpoint the election of 2024 as that major point that defines the rest of this century. The 20th century was the American century. Donald Trump, in my humble opinion, with these actions, has triggered the end of that experience. Period. Because why would any nation, especially young people watching this all over the world, ever trust the United States again? Why? I'm an American that fought for my country, and I cannot give you logic-based explanation outside of nostalgia based on what the administration is doing. We have a person that can't even lead domestically. He's ripping the country apart. You had 8 million people on Saturday in the streets of America. We only have 330 million, and we had 8 million. That is unprecedented, and that's not counting the international community that was out and about as well. He has united the world, ironically, against him, where the world is asking America, what is wrong with you? And we in America don't have an answer for him. We'll be dissecting this. Psychologists have had their say, but understand this: the American century is over because we put the biggest beneficiary of that century in power a second time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bobby, we should probably wind this down. What should we be looking at for the next week? Like, what's the signal? What when the alarm goes off, what's it going to look like?
What I'm concerned about is, okay, when all these forces arrive on station here this week, I've been on record saying April is going to be the most interesting month of this thing so far, because now you have troops. It's put up or shut up time. You can't just have them loitering there, or as Hegseth says, hovering above you, bringing death and destruction, whatever. Because again, he thinks it's a 1980s flick, right?
Oh my God!
You have these forces there. The longer that they are there, the more the risk of miscalculation can come into, or to be completely honest, the more you want to use them. The more you'll want to use them. And that right there should scare Americans, because when you commit forces, Trump is a very vain individual, and he will look pretty bad if he has the 82nd, the 31st, and the 11th there, and he didn't use them in any capacity. The taco chants will start. All of this stuff will penetrate the Mar-a-Lago bubble. And this is why, put that article back up about the Pentagon. This is why this is happening, because they understand the commander-in-chief that they're dealing with.
Which one?
They know. No. The one that said they've been planning for weeks.
Oh God.
That one. They knew the second bombs were dropped that this was going to be a possibility.
Yeah.
Because those who know military history and military strategy know you cannot overthrow a regime and you cannot take over a country solely by airstrikes. And once they let it slip that regime change was the damn goal because they didn't have the nuclear one that he could talk to and talk about, this is why they've been doing this for weeks. We're talking about preparing for weeks of ground operations. I just think that's fascinating to me because even Desert Storm, which was the cleanest damn land invasion we've seen in a lifetime, lasted more than just a couple of weeks. It lasted like 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, also, and you talk about clean, the objectives were clear.
Very.
Right?
A coalition of the willing was there.
They were restrained. They didn't get stuck in a quagmire. This is not so. Weeks, I think, is remarkably optimistic.
The difference there are many differences here between what happened in 91 and what's happening now. But the biggest thing that jumps out to me is very simple. 35 years ago, you had a coalition of the willing. Now you're going to have a slither of the reluctant, meaning you may have one or two countries who may join you from afar because this is directly impacting them, like, the UK.
Sure.
But there will not be anybody willing to do it. They don't believe in the righteousness of the mission because they don't know what the hell the mission is. And despite what they're saying, and as much as you hate Iran, the way this went down was just wrong. It was wrong. And they know it. And so we got some issues. And we have the most unprofessional diplomats we have ever had in the 21st century or the 20th century now, think about it, leading the drive for peace.
Well, Bobby, we'll be looking for your voice.
Wow.
Everyone out there, you got to subscribe to Bobby's Substack. He gives really incredible updates almost every day. Do you do it every day?
Every morning I try to give a little 5 minute. This is what I'm thinking based on what I saw the night before. Going back to that process, it's like, okay, we saw this targeted. And there are some brilliant. Let me be very clear. I need to make sure these guys, like Cappy's Army on YouTube, former infantry guy that spent multiple tours in Iraq, him breaking it down, Task and Purpose, those guys over there have been doing. There are some great people putting out high quality video content, trying to react to this stuff. I try to do it in very short and try to make it as digestible. I don't try to use as many military terms. I'm like, they have more missiles than these guys do. It's not good. You know what I'm saying? I will be Fred Flintstone to their George Jetson when trying to describe this stuff. But at the same time, I think it's very important that Americans understand not only what the country has now been dragged into, but what your loved ones who do serve may have to contend with. That's significant.
It is. Yeah, everyone, you got to subscribe. It's such a good bit of content every day and really kind of keeps me sane. So I appreciate that. Man, Bobby, thank you. Thank you for this. And everyone, we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.